All right, get ready, because today we're going deep on something that just gets you thinking, what if?
Oh, yeah.
We're talking Hidden City, like a full-blown civilization under Death Valley.
No way.
And all this comes from,
Hold on, under Death Valley.
yeah, from this audiobook, Ancient Civilizations Beneath Death Valley.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Hidden cities always get the imagination going, right?
Yeah.
Like something just waiting to be found.
Exactly. What's wild is it's not just one story, but multiple, all hinting at the same thing.
So we're going full conspiracy theory on this deep dive, huh?
More like deep history, maybe.
All right, lead the way. Where do we even start with this?
So one story that really grabs you, it's about these miners, Jack and Bill. They're exploring an old mine shaft near Wingate Pass.
Old mine shaft. Sounds spooky already.
Right, and suddenly the bottom gives way. One of them falls through into this huge cavern.
And that's where they find this lost city.
That's what they claim. But hold on, their descriptions are pretty wild. Miles of caverns under the Panamint Mountains.
Okay, I'm picturing this
They find mummies, perfectly preserved, decked out in gold, weapons too.
mummies in Death Valley. Something doesn't add up there.
Right. And it gets weirder. Giant gold statues, vaults full of gold bars and gems.
Someone's been playing too much Tomb Raider.
Maybe. But then they describe this massive round table, like a council chamber or something.
Okay, now I've got my attention. So any hints about tech? Like how advanced was this city?
This is where it gets really interesting. They talk about a gas-powered lighting system.
Gas-powered, like way back then.
That's what they say. If true, that changes everything we think we know about ancient civilizations.
Totally. Gas lighting is way later in our history books. If this is true, it's like next level stuff.
And there's more. Stone wheelbarrows, but like super advanced, beyond anything we've seen.
Stone wheelbarrows. Doesn't sound too crazy.
Oh, but the craftsmanship, the design, it implies serious engineering skills. Like, how did they even...
Okay, I see your point. Stonework like that, it takes precision, balance, durability. It's not as simple as it sounds.
Plus, they mention tunnels high up on the mountainsides. They think maybe docks from when Death Valley was underwater.
Whoa, wait, like boats pulling up to these mountain caves.
That's the picture they paint. It's wild, Rava.
And actually, geologically speaking, Death Valley was a sea once. So
Yeah.
that part, at least, kind of makes sense.
So you're saying the landscape itself could back up some of their claims?
Possibly. But hold on, what about Jack and Bill? They tried to tell people, right?
Oh, yeah. Big time. They wanted to make a deal with the Smithsonian.
Makes sense. Big institution like that, it would give their story credibility. So what happened?
So their story is a friend, supposedly, stole the treasure they'd collected as proof.
Ugh, classic betrayal. So they had no evidence.
And when they went back to the mine entrance with experts, the landscape had changed so much they couldn't find it again.
Wow. Talk about bad luck. To be so close to this huge discovery and have it slip away, it's like a movie plot.
And it gets worse. Jack and Bill, they were determined to prove their story.
I bet. So what did they do?
They went looking for those tunnel openings, the ones high up in the Panamints,
Alone.
and they were never seen again.
Vanished. Just like the city they claimed to find. Makes you think, doesn't it?
Chills, right. Was it the desert that got them, or is there something else going on?
Death Valley doesn't mess around. It can disorient you, overwhelm you, even experienced people.
Yeah, but the timing is just creepy.
It definitely adds to the mystery, that's for sure.
But hold on, this isn't the only story about hidden stuff under Death Valley. There's another one, early 1930s. This guy, Dr. F. Bruce Russell.
Okay, another mysterious character. Another hidden something or other. What did this doctor find?
So he says he finds this underground chamber branching off into tunnels. One leads to a room with mummies.
More mummies, come on now.
But get this, he claims these mummies are over 8 feet tall.
8 feet tall. Okay, now that's just ridiculous. Mummies I can maybe believe, but 8 feet tall.
It's definitely out there, but there are more details, even weirder stuff.
Okay, hit me with it.
He describes the artifacts around the mummies as like a mix of Egyptian and Native American designs.
Hold up, Egyptian and Native American.
Yeah.
Like, together.
Yeah, a total blend. Makes you wonder about connections between these cultures that we don't even know about.
That's a huge leap, even for me. If that's true, it changes everything we know about ancient history.
Right, it's mind-blowing. But unlike those miners, this Dr. Russell, he wants to make a show of his discovery.
What show?
He starts this company, Amazing Explorations Incorporated, the whole deal.
Sounds like a guy who knew how to make a headline.
Yeah.
So what's the catch?
Here's the crazy part. He vanishes.
Another one. Seriously. 2 stories, 2 disappearances.
Oh.
It's almost too much of a coincidence.
Right. It's like, is there something about Death Valley or these discoveries that just makes people disappear?
It's spooky, that's for sure. So did anyone ever find this doctor's amazing chambers?
Nope. Despite his supposed detailed directions, those caverns are still lost. And Dr. Russell. Well, they found his car abandoned, radiator busted, suitcase still inside.
A busted radiator and a suitcase. It's like he was running away from something. Or someone.
It's a total mystery. But wait, there's one more thing before we jump into whether any of this is even possible.
You're killing me with suspense. What else is there?
Remember that old TV show, Death Valley Days?
Yeah, vaguely. Cowboys and stuff, right?
Well, there's this episode, pioneers find mummies in the desert. And apparently, every script for that show was based on a true story.
What? Seriously?
Yeah.
So that mummy story, it actually happened.
Maybe. It's like, is this just a coincidence? Or are we on to something real here? Something hidden, buried under all the sand and the doubt.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Let's shift gears a bit. Are we talking hoaxes here, tall tales? Or is there something more to all this?
Time to put on our critical thinking caps.
Before we get ahead of ourselves, we got to establish some basics. Death Valley has been inhabited for a long time.
Right, the Timbisha Shoshone Native American tribes, their history goes way back.
Exactly. We can't just ignore what we already know about Death Valley's past. We got to see how these stories fit in.
So we're looking at this through a historical lens, a cultural lens. Makes sense.
Open mind, but critical thinking too. That's the key.
All right, so let's dive into that history. What about the Timbisha Shoshone? Do they have stories that connect to this hidden city idea?
Now this is where it gets interesting. While they don't have stories about a city exactly, some southwestern tribes do talk about their ancestors living underground.
Like a whole civilization underground, really.
More like migrating from underground realms or dwelling in hidden worlds. Not quite a bustling metropolis.
So there's at least some precedent for this concept in their traditions. But how did those stories square with the more outlandish details we've heard?
That's the puzzle, isn't it? We got to figure out what's rooted in real cultural memory, what's been exaggerated, what's been misunderstood.
Right. We need your expertise to sort through all of this. Let's start with that gaslighting system. Could there be a more basis for that claim, historically speaking?
Here's where we got to be careful not to project our modern ideas onto the past.
So you're saying just because WE connect gaslighting with a certain time period doesn't mean earlier civilizations couldn't have figured out something similar.
Exactly. And remember, we're dealing with stories passed down, maybe embellished along the way.
So the miners might have seen something that looked like gaslighting, but actually worked differently.
It was possible. Maybe they use natural resources in a way we haven't figured out yet. We just don't know.
That's a good point. Just because we haven't found proof of a certain technology doesn't mean it never existed.
You got it.
Yeah.
And this goes for those advanced wheelbarrows, too. No direct archaeological evidence, but lots of ancient cultures were masters of stonework.
Like the pyramids, Stonehenge, mind-blowing stuff.
Right. Imagine the skills it took to build those. So maybe sophisticated tools like those wheelbarrows, they're not so far-fetched after all.
Okay, so maybe these claims, they're not totally impossible given what we know about ancient capabilities?
But at least not entirely. But let's be real, we're missing some key pieces of the puzzle. No hard evidence, you know.
It just means the search continues. Right.
Exactly. But let's talk about those 8-foot-tall mummies for a second.
Okay, yeah. That one's hard to wrap your head around. Not just history, but biology, too. How does a human get that tall?
It's rare, but it happens. Gigantism. It's a hormonal thing.
So those mummies, they could have been real giants.
I'm not saying that. We need way more evidence than just a story. But gigantism, it is a real condition.
Okay, so not completely out of the realm of possibility then. But what about that mix of Egyptian and Native American designs? That's a tough one to swallow.
Right. Transoceanic contact like that, it's a big debate among archaeologists. Most say it never happened.
But what if it did? What if we're missing some key piece of history here?
It's fun to think about. Look, our understanding of ancient history is always changing. New discoveries all the time.
So even if direct contact is a stretch, maybe there was some indirect cultural exchange that we haven't figured out yet.
Keep an open mind. I'm not saying I believe it, but exploring those what-ifs is what makes this stuff so fascinating.
I totally agree. It reminds you that history isn't always straightforward. There could be all sorts of connections we just haven't uncovered.
Absolutely. But let's not get carried away. We still got to deal with those inconsistencies, the missing evidence, and those disappearances.
Yeah, that's the shadow hanging over all of this. How do those fit into the picture?
I know it's tempting to jump to ancient curses or something, but Death Valley is a dangerous place, plain and simple.
Right, people get lost, accidents happen, especially in a place that extreme.
It's a harsh reality check, but important to remember.
Still, that mystery lingers. It's like we may never know the full truth.
And that's what keeps us coming back for more, right? The unknown is a powerful force.
Okay, so we've got these stories, amazing but flawed. What are we supposed to make of them? Believe them, ignore them.
I think the best way to approach this is to embrace that uncertainty. We may never have all the answers.
It's about the journey, the exploration.
Exactly.
All right, everyone listening, it's your turn now. Weigh the evidence, think critically, do your own digging. What do you think?
Maybe one of you will be the one to crack the case, solve the mystery once and for all.
That's the exciting part. All right, we've gone deep on Death Valley today. Keep those minds curious, and we'll see you next time for another adventure into the unknown. Okay, back into the Death Valley rabbit hole we go. We've got mummies, hidden cities, gaslighting before its time. Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It really does. And for me, it's those little details, the ones that seem impossible, that really hold the key.
So let's tackle that gas-powered lighting system the miners described. How can that even exist with what we know about ancient tech?
It's easy to think we know everything, right?
Hmm.
But our understanding of ancient tech, it's always changing. New discoveries pop up, and suddenly, what seemed impossible, well, maybe it wasn't.
That's a good point. It's like we forget those ancient cultures, they were pretty darn clever.
And about that gaslighting, maybe the miners, they didn't have the right words to describe what they saw. Maybe it looked like gaslighting, but it worked in a totally different way.
So, like, they saw light, assumed it was gas, but it was something else entirely. Some other technology we haven't rediscovered.
Could be. We underestimate ancient cultures all the time. They might have tapped into natural resources in ways we don't even understand yet.
Like, we're missing a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Just because we haven't found proof doesn't mean it wasn't there.
Exactly. Same goes for those super advanced stone wheelbarrows. Think about it. Tons of ancient cultures were masters of stonework.
Yeah, the pyramids, Stonehenge. They didn't have modern tools, and look what they accomplished.
It's mind-boggling, right? So maybe these wheelbarrows with the right skills and knowledge, they're not so crazy after all.
All right, so we're saying while we can't prove these things right now, given what we know about ancient civilizations, they're not totally out of the question.
Exactly. We need more evidence, sure. But let's jump to something even wilder. Those 8-foot-tall mummies Dr. Russell described. Now that's just nuts, right? Not just historically, but biologically.
Yeah, 8-foot-tall mummies, that's a whole other level. It's almost easier to just say he made it up. But is there any way, scientifically, a human could get that tall?
Well, there's a condition. It's called gigantism. It's hormonal, pretty rare, but it happens.
So those mummies, they could have been real giants, like walking around Death Valley.
Whoa, hold on. I'm not saying that. We need way more than just a story to go on. But gigantism, it is a real thing.
Okay, so it's not completely impossible. But what about that mix of Egyptian and Native American designs Dr. Russell talked about? That's where my brain starts to melt.
Yeah, transoceanic contact, ancient Egypt, and the Americas. It's a hot topic, lots of debate. Most archaeologists say, no way.
But what if they're wrong? What if there's a whole chapter of history we're missing?
Fun to think about.
Right.
Our understanding of history, it's always being updated. New discoveries all the time.
So maybe not direct contact, but some kind of indirect cultural exchange, something we haven't figured out yet.
I like how you think. I'm not saying I buy it, but those what-ifs, that's what keeps history alive.
It's like history isn't always a straight line. Maybe there are connections we just haven't made yet.
Now you're getting it. But let's be real for a sec. We've got inconsistencies, missing evidence, and those disappearances. We can't just ignore that.
Yeah, that's the creepy part. Makes you wonder, is there something dangerous about these discoveries? Or is there a simpler answer?
It's easy to jump to curses and whatnot, but Death Valley, it's dangerous enough on its own.
Right. Getting lost, accidents, dehydration. In a place like that, it's a real threat.
It's a good reminder, even with all these fantastical stories, nature is still a force to be reckoned with.
True, true. Still, you can't shake that feeling of mystery. Like, we may never know the whole story.
And that's part of the appeal, isn't it? The unknown, the possibility that there's more out there just waiting to be found.
All right, so what's the verdict? Do we believe these Death Valley tales? Or are they just tall tales?
I think the best we can do is embrace the mystery. Maybe we'll never have all the answers, but that's part of the fun.
It's about the search, the exploration. It's up to each of you listening to decide what you believe. Do your own research, dig into those sources, and see what you find.
Maybe one of you listening will be the one to solve this mystery. Now that would be something.
Okay, so Death Valley, right. Giant mummies, lost cities, gaslights way back when. That's a lot to take in, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely got that what-if factor. But let's be real for a minute. We need a reality check after all that.
Right, time to put on our skeptical hats. Honestly, there's no real proof of this hidden city, is there?
You got it. We've talked about some interesting ideas, but solid archaeological evidence, not so much.
Yeah, it's like that saying, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So are we just dealing with good stories then? Nothing more.
Not necessarily. Even without a smoking gun, there might be something valuable here. We just got to look at it the right way.
Okay, I'm listening. What do you mean?
Remember, we talked about those Native American stories, the Timbisha Shoshone, their history in Death Valley?
Yeah, those stories about their ancestors living underground in hidden worlds.
Right. Now, those stories, they might be the seed, the inspiration for these wilder tales about lost cities.
So like a game of telephone, a story changes each time it's told.
Exactly. Maybe it started as a sacred cave, a hidden spring, then over generations, bam, lost city with all the bells and whistles.
So you're saying these accounts, even if not literally true, could be echoes of real cultural memory?
That's one way to look at it. Plus, think about Death Valley itself. It's extreme, it's vast, it plays tricks on your mind.
Yeah, the desert, it can really mess with you. Heat, mirages, it's easy to see how stories would spring up from that.
Right, and those details about advanced tech, maybe not literally gaslights and fancy wheelbarrows, but it shows how resourceful those ancient people were.
So even if we ditch the fantastical stuff, there's still a lesson here about how people survived, innovated, passed down knowledge.
That's the heart of it. These stories, they might not be history books, but they tell us something about the human spirit, you know?
Okay, I can dig that. But we can't ignore those disappearances. That's some seriously spooky stuff. What's your take on that?
Look, I love a good mystery as much as the next person. But Death Valley, it's a dangerous place, period.
Yeah, you said it before, heat, getting lost, accidents happen.
Sometimes the simplest explanation is the most likely one.
Right, right. Still, you can't help but wonder, what if there's more to it? It's like a story that's never truly finished.
And that's part of what makes it so fascinating, isn't it? That pull of the unknown.
So, where do we land on all this? Truth, fiction, somewhere in between.
I say, embrace the mystery. Maybe we'll never have all the answers. But that's okay. The journey is part of the fun.
Well said. Everyone listening, it's up to you now. What do you think? Do your own research, read those stories, explore the history.
Maybe one of you will uncover the truth about Death Valley. Wouldn't that be something?
Now that's a thought to leave you with. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep those minds curious, and we'll see you next time for another adventure into the unknown.